Howdy. Today we'll be talking about the difference between muscle memory and mental memory with a horse, and really compare which one is better between the two. And um, yeah, so obviously when training horses, you want to use both muscle memory and mental memory. And it's not very clear. A lot of horse trainers don't actually understand the difference between the two. They don't understand when a horse needs to be taught like if a horse has a bad behavior, if that behavior is a mental behavior or if it's a physical, like muscle related behavior. And so, yeah, it's a really fun topic to talk about. This is what I love because in order to know what a horse is remembering, you have to be like very acutely aware of what the horse is doing and how it's manifesting its memory. And so I'll just say straight up from the beginning that I think that muscle memory is always more important than the mental memory that a horse has. If you don't have the muscle memory, then you can't teach the horse other things. And we actually see that with humans too. It is as a human develops, and you could say this with the horse too, as a human and baby horse like develop, it's only as they start to move in more ways, like as a human learns to roll around, then it learns to crawl, then it learns to walk. As a human masters its physical memory, then it's able to do its mental memory. And it's the same with horses. You can see that in their dynamics, in their herds in the wild, and just, yeah, throughout their lifespan. But, so now let's just get into muscle memory. So the reason why muscle memory is the most important and the most effective, and why I just say it's better, it's the most necessary, is because when you give a release to the horse, when the horse does what you want and then you give the release of pressure, that's a muscle related thing. The horse, you're giving, as the trainer, you were watching their muscles do something, and then when they did a behavior you wanted with their muscles, you released the pressure. This isn't always the case, but this is like 90% of the case, unless you're a trainer that specifically is working on mental attuneness on the horse, like, because you can give the release when they're doing a good mental exercise, but in like the broad aspect, most people don't even know how to put this into words probably, and so most people just do it on the physical behavior that they're releasing the pressure. So just like, for example, if you want a horse to pick up their feet when you bring your hand up along their leg, then you're going to release the pressure when the horse brings his foot up and it's standing still. You're not going to release the pressure as soon as the horse starts to think of picking up its foot. It's really complicated. You can get into that. The way that some people do is they do focus on what the horse is thinking, and they will give a release if they think the horse is thinking of picking up its foot. And you just have to be very aware of all the little behavior manifestations that a horse would be making in order to make that call correctly. Most of the time, even if you're really, really trying, most of the time you're going to be like 50-50, and you're not going to get it right sometimes. And so when you're getting paid as a horse trainer to get a horse trained, you want to do it based off of the muscle memory, because you don't have the time to be wrong half of the time. With my own horses, when I own my horses, I do like to focus more on the thought process. And so I will I'll give the release if the horse is thinking the correct thing, because it does make a difference. It does teach the horse to be lighter, and to, like, after all, that's what you're training a horse for. You're training their mind. And so if you can get that faster, then it's worth taking the 50-50 gamble of maybe you're reading the behavior incorrectly, maybe you'll miss on your release. But when it comes to training somebody else's horse, you need to get the results faster. And so, so the release is muscular. I just want you guys to understand that. So, whatever the horse is physically doing that's correct, that's when the trainer typically releases the pressure. And so um, um, and so that's what the horse is going to remember and excel at. Another reason why muscle memory is more important is because it's through muscle memory that a horse first learns to connect different trained behaviors. So, for example, when I'm under a saddle on a horse, like when I'm riding a horse, and I want to teach the horse to stay in the trot, and I want it to always like be responsible for its feet. I want it to stay in that gait. I don't want to have to keep nagging it to stay in the trot. And so I'm gonna be trotting that horse around, and when I feel like that horse has kind of gotten into the rhythm, and its muscles are trotting, then once I feel like those muscles have kind of got that memory in, then I'm gonna give the release. And the really cool part is, so then if you sit there, the horse has released, it's not trotting anymore, like it's just standing still. The horse, if you watch its behavior, it'll start to like lower its head, and it'll get comfortable, doze off, maybe start, it might find something that it's curious about, start like wanting to kind of investigate something. But anyways, regardless, when the horse is really relaxed after a release of pressure, so you're still in that release mode, when the horse horses, just like people, when we're relaxed, we go in and out of being relaxed. So we'll be like, we'll like every once in a while they'll kind of look up and be like, are we still sleeping here? Are we still just giving the release? And then if you don't do anything, then they'll go back to being totally relaxed. And the cool thing is, if you watch them, they go back into the position of like what they were doing when they got the release of the pressure. So like and I'm going to connect this to how their memory works. So just think about what helps a horse remember things. But so when a horse is you're trotting a horse and you stop the horse is going to fall asleep. When the horse kind of wakes up out of that sleep on its own just a little bit, the horse goes back to the body position it had when it got the release. So if and that body position that it goes back to, for example, like it just raises its head a little bit more. It puts its ears in the same position they were in typically, that they were when they got the release. So you'll see this, like if a horse was really disliking you before it got the release, then it'll like have its ears pinned, and so if a horse's ears are pinned, and then you give a release and you let it fall asleep, then when the horse wakes up from the release, it'll pin its ears, and you're like, that's funny, but it's showing that the horse, when it goes in and out of its release, that it physically goes back to the place where it was when it got the release. And so every time it goes in and out from like sleep, like being really relaxed to just semi-relaxed, it's actually like remembering. It's making itself remember. It's really cool. Like it's going from thinking about nothing to, oh yeah, remember when we trot, and keep our gait in the trot really well. And then it goes back to sleep and it's bored. And then after being bored for a while, it goes up and it's like, and you can see its ears go to the same spot. And the horse will be like, oh yeah, remember like the trot? And so it's really, really good to let a horse do that as many times as you can. And this is just showing that muscle position. The muscle positions help ingrain the thought process of the horse. So you can, like, that's how you get to them thinking about things is through the muscles. And most people aren't aware of this, because most people aren't like me. I give so much time for a horse to just relax. I really like, that's how I learned what horses' behavior is by just watching them for hours. And I wasn't gonna make them do something if I didn't know what I was preventing. You know, you don't want to be preventing a horse from having a really relaxed experience if you can. Like, you always want them to be as comfortable as possible. And so I would spend a lot of time after giving a release to observe what they actually do if I just let them keep doing something on their own. And there's a fine line. After a while, if a horse keeps going in and out from its sleep to boredom, after a while the horse is gonna forget the thing that it keeps going back to. Like with trotting, like I've been giving the example, it'll go from sleep to boredom and remember trotting. It'll go from sleep to boredom and remember trotting. And after about probably I think it's usually about like 4 times after a horse is like kind of going back and forth from sleep to boredom. Then about like the 5th time the horse goes back to sleep, I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna let it go back to this boredom level, because I don't think it's gonna remember trotting. I think it's gonna be so bored that it tries to get curious or, you know, do something else. And right now I'm working on trotting. And so after the 4th time it like goes back, and this is if the horse is being good, and like that's probably the most that I would do, you know. Most people don't know how to read a horse and keep them that relaxed. And so after it goes to like the 4th time, then I'm gonna, like the 4th time of it relaxing, then while it's in that relaxed state, I'm going to ask it now to start working again. And we're gonna get back to the trot. And once it's trotting again in a really good way, then I'm gonna give the release. And bam, that horse is already it has so much just repetition in its mind and its muscles, because we've only done the actual trotting, say, twice, but each time I stopped it and gave it the release, it remembered the trotting 4 separate times. And so that's why the muscle memory is so important. And I'm gonna talk more about this with the pasture. So if a horse is just out in a pasture, and you observe when the horse goes back and forth between these relaxed and bored states, or sleepy, you could say, and bored states. And it's really cool. Like, this is what I capitalize on. Like this is why I feel like, you know, I have the advantage on understanding their behavior compared to most people. As the horse, let's say, for example, I'm gonna first do the example of a horse just eating in the pasture. If a horse is eating in the pasture, then it'll get bored, then it'll fall asleep. But you know what's interesting? When the horse wakes up, what does it do? It puts its head back to eating. Like it doesn't actually go to eat, but it'll put its head back to the position that it was in before it got the release of pressure. Same with a foal. If a foal is nursing its mother and then the foal gets bored, if the foal gets bored while it's underneath its mother and nursing, then the foal, once it stops being bored, it's gonna go right, like its body just has this natural tendency. Like the horse doesn't think about it. The horse will go from nursing and be bored, and then it'll go back to the position of nursing. But even if it's not wanting to nurse, that's just the body's natural reaction. And what is that doing? That's teaching the horse, like, oh yeah, remember, like this is where I get my food. Like this is the thing I was doing before I was comfortable. And that's so important to them because they always want to be comfortable. You see this with horses that if they're scratching each other's withers, or if they're standing side by side with their tails, swishing in their faces to keep the flies off. With all scenarios that you can see a horse is doing something particular, like it's in a specific behavior, and it can be any behavior, these very minute ones, like I've said, and then it goes from, and then it leaves that behavior because it's bored, like it gets a release, so it's scratching the back of another horse, and then it just gets bored. And then once the horse stops being bored, it puts its body back onto the withers of the horse. And it doesn't do that because it wants to scratch. It does that because that's how they remember things. They remember, they learn things by the repetitious of, like their mind goes back and forth. And it's really cool because I don't know if most people understand that about horses. Most people don't think that horses can actually sit there and think about something. And most people are wrong about that just because they don't give a horse time to actually think about it, and they don't observe a horse in the wild on those behaviors and on that relaxed state. Like I truly watch them when they're falling asleep, and then I'll sit out there until they wake up and see what mannerisms they make, you know? So yeah, now we'll get, that was all the muscular memory and why it's so important, like why emphasizing the release on the muscle memory, on the muscle behavior is more important than the thought behavior. And another reason, before I get into the mental, is because, you know, the process that you train a horse is through creating movement, redirecting movement, and inhibiting movement. And that's from Clinton Anderson's videos. And like I've said, I'm not certified by him or a clinician or anything like that, but he just speaks the truth on a lot of things. And one of them is he himself, in that process of creating movement, redirecting movement, and inhibiting movement, he's showing you that the muscle movement of that that movement is more important than the thoughts of the horse. So now let's get into the thoughts. So mental memory. I'm going to make a list. I'm going to just say a list of the things that I've wrote down. There's way more. Like it's an infinite amount of mental things you can teach a horse, you know? And so just like physically, you can teach a horse to do so many cool things with its body. Really, the body is the limit, just like with humans. The more we learn to do things with our hands, the more we learn to make movements, the more our mind actually expands and creates room to remember things. And so with horses, it's the same. And so as long as the horse has good physical ability, you can teach that horse the same amount of mental abilities. And I'm not listing an exhaustive list or anything. This is just really quick. In 5 minutes, I wrote down, mentally, you can teach a horse to be respectful. Like you can teach it to have respectful thoughts. And then you can teach it who is alpha. You can teach them to be, like I mentioned, be responsible for their gait. You can teach them to think through pressure. And then the last one I wrote is that you can teach them to be relaxed while working hard. All of these are things that a horse has to learn to think about. Like a horse doesn't naturally, most horses don't enjoy the work that they do because most people don't know how to do it right. And so you can see horses get sour towards their owners or towards a specific type of work. That's a mental thing you can teach a horse. You can teach a horse to enjoy and to be relaxed while working. That's not a physical behavior. You can teach them that lesson of being relaxed and content and happy during a job. You can teach them that with any physical training lesson. Like you don't have to be in the saddle. You can do it in a round pen. You can do it, on a lunge line. And that's the same with all of these mental ones. So on a mental exercise, it doesn't matter what exercise you're doing. As long as you've mastered that exercise, you feel like you can, to the point to where you can teach that mental lesson. As long as the horse is ready, because sometimes horses aren't ready for a mental lesson. Like when you're round penning a horse for the first time, a horse needs to first learn to show respectful body language before it can learn the concept of like who's alpha, and to be responsible for its gait and things like that. So all of those things are mental, and they can be taught in any exercise, relatively any exercise. So the mental, what I want to be sure to say though is that you need both if you want a good horse. A good horse needs to be taught things mentally and physically, and with the muscle memory. As a trainer, it's more fun to focus on what they're thinking, but to get results for your clients, you want to focus more on the muscle memory because that's the faster result. And mental memory is where your power comes from, like the long-lasting power from a horse comes from, because if a horse learns to have good thought processes, then the horse can be put in any muscle memory or like any muscular exercise, and the horse will perform well, and it'll use the lessons it was taught in its mind. Where if a horse has only been taught things with its body, the horse only has its body to solve the problem. It won't use its mind. Thank you. I hope this all helps, and have a good one.